All righty, we're on the air. Good morning. Welcome to College Coffee Talk. Andy Lockwood. This is our weekly show when we talk about getting into college, about paying for college, about test prep, anything related to the admissions or financial aid process, including whether or not you should even bother going to college. Pearl, my co-host, and little lady is on special assignment this week, so it's just me flying solo. If you have a cup of coffee or something along those lines and you're joining us live, join me in a synchronized sip. 1, 2, 3. Good morning. We just hit our 200th episode on our podcast, The College Admissions Edge, and look, it's big news. You know, we were just named to the top 5 in college planning podcasts overall. That's according to a random internet search that I did about 7 minutes ago. So it's got to be true. And also our glowing 3.8 user rating out of, I think, 14 reviews. So things are going great for us. I don't mean to brag. I wanted to make this episode about you, but I just couldn't help with the showing off there, the flex. So, all right. So today I wanted to talk about something that Pearl brought up to me a few hours ago when we were convening at around 6 a.m. with our first cups of coffee. So we have a client this year, and Pearl handles all the financial aid applications for our clients, roughly 400 families every year. We have a client this year who had taken a gap year, maybe a couple gap years, because he studied overseas, and is now rematriculating at Columbia University. Now, Columbia's been in the news many times over the past, I guess, more than a year from now, getting picked on, I think justifiably so, frankly. But here's something else to add to the lore or the mix of how bad things or stupid things are at Columbia. So this year, as our client tried to get everything ready for the upcoming semester, fall 2025, winter 26, he received a financial aid award that was much, much worse than the original one that he got a couple of years ago. One of the explanations is that the family's income is up, a fair amount since the initial filing, right? But not really that much. On top of that, there's a sibling that attends a different college. So for private colleges, mostly private colleges that include Columbia, they still give somewhat of a sibling discount. Just to go partially down a rabbit hole here, the FAFSA, the federal financial aid application that does not necessarily govern schools like Columbia, the private universities, no longer treats a family with more than one child in college differently than a family with one kid in school. But the private colleges still give at least a little or a full sibling discount. That's the way the rules used to be. If you have questions on this stuff, you can lob them in here. If you're watching us on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Lockwood College Prep. If you're listening to it on the podcast sometime later or watching on YouTube, try the comments section there, or just go to our website, lockwoodcollegeprep.com. Anyway, this time around, the financial aid award was much worse. And our client, called up the financial aid office at Columbia and said, "Hey, I'm kind of shocked and dismayed. This is a lot of money for us to be able to come up with. We were planning on getting approximately the same amounts that you had offered us before." And the person in the financial aid office said something like, "Oh yeah, well, we didn't understand how your income could have been so different 3 years ago, and now it's not." Which is the dumbest thing, because financial aid offices are supposed to evaluate your file based on the information you submit each year, not based on historical data. By the way, they're the first ones to throw out any type of argument that you make about something that happened a couple of years ago, but not when it suits them, when they're trying to lowball a client, a student who's going to that college. The fact of the matter is that her income is up, and that's because she's got a family business and things fluctuate, but that's normal. anyone who's self-employed or got some sort of self-employment or commissioned or something has fluctuating income if you're not just a straight W-2 person. So it's not that baffling why the income is up, but instead of giving our client a reaching out by email or something saying, hey, we have a question for you, we want to verify your application here, instead of doing that to get to the obvious answer, my family business fluctuates, they just gave a crappy lowball award, and of course hope that the mom would just accept it. But that's just not the case. And there's other things that happened too. There was a divorce. There was some health stuff going on. I mean, there's more than just fluctuating income at stake here. So really annoying. We're in the process of appealing that. We ran the numbers. I should say Pearl ran the numbers because she can calculate what a fair award should be from each college based on plugging in information into the formulas that the colleges use to determine eligibility, plus their historical levels of generosity, plus their own net price calculators and all that. And she was able to figure out what a fair award would be. And it's a lot better than the stingy, crappy award that they gave our client this time. So I think that's the message here that I wanted to get across, is that you shouldn't just rely on what colleges tell you, because the people in those financial aid offices, I think for the most part, they understand the rules, but sometimes they don't. Maybe it's someone who's green and is just feeling the need to answer something without actually checking what the procedures are or what the regulations are. We see that a lot of times at the high school level, when a high school brings in an outside speaker to talk about financial aid. You might have this at your high school. It's like college night or financial aid night or something like that. And they'll typically bring in someone who works at a local college. Generally speaking, the local colleges require the FAFSA only, whereas schools like Columbia and other private colleges require either their own institutional forms or the CSS profile, which is, probably 6 or 7 times as long as the FAFSA and about 100 times more complicated, but they don't discuss that. So they will say words to the effect of, okay, the FAFSA comes out, it's free, you shouldn't have to pay anyone to fill it out for you. October 1st is when it's released. You're going to need your tax returns, and good luck filling it out. Most of you won't qualify for anything anyway, but you should just do it. That's the short version of the hour-and-a-half college night that you might have at your high school this fall. We've heard bad advice from those, not just bad, I should say incorrect advice from those visiting roving financial aid officers along the lines of, oh yeah, we will look at your retirement accounts. Well, actually on the FAFSA, it says very specifically in the directions to the question about your net worth, specifically do not exclude information about your 401k, IRA, etc., all retirement accounts. So you can't really outsource all this information, even though you would think you should be able to trust people who work in financial aid offices at colleges or your guidance counselor themselves. They don't always know the ins and outs, and they're usually well-intentioned. I'll sort of throw them a bone there, but you have to be in charge of the process yourself. And that means, number one, understanding which financial aid applications are required. Number two, when are they required to be filed? Because that's a whole different timeline than the applications for admission. So most seniors right now, hopefully, are trying to figure out when everything is due for them to apply for admission. So I ran a boot camp session yesterday, actually Sunday, for our 2026 grads, and I talked to a handful of kids about, all right, here's how you figure out on the common application when all of your applications are due. After you determine whether you're applying early action, if that school offers that, or early decision, which is the fake binding way to apply to college, or regular decision, or restricted early action, or any of the other variations, you can sort that on the common application and see when everything is due. That's different from the financial aid applications, which has nothing to do with the common application. It's an entirely separate process, and you've got to look at when those are due. They are not necessarily on the same dates as the applications for admission. Two separate timelines. So the sooner you finalize your college list and figure out how you're applying, how your kid is applying to each college, then the sooner you should be figuring out when all the financial aid applications are due. The FAFSA and the CSS profile and most of the other separate individual institutional forms, those come out October 1st. Those deadlines might be as early as October 15th or November 1. It really depends on what colleges you're applying to and how you're applying and what their deadlines are and all that. And then there's the whole thing about, well, what happens next? What happens next is you should be on the lookout for, after you file, for post-filing follow-ups. So the example that I gave earlier at the top of this episode here about our client who got lowballed by Columbia, I'm a little skeptical that they never reached out to her. Maybe she just missed those emails, but I'm not convinced, so I'm just speculating here. But in many cases, a college will reach out and say, we have additional requests for you. We need some more information. Sometimes they are verifying, which is kind of like a light audit, what the information that you put down. Maybe they picked up something on your tax return, like some interest income, but they can't match the asset from what you filed that corresponds with that interest. Maybe you're self-employed and they need more disclosures, something called a business/farm supplement, which is sort of a P&L for 2 years for your business and a balance sheet and some other stuff. So it's not over when you file by any means, because there will be follow-up requests. I should say this too. Sometimes these requests are like the most cortisol raising, high blood pressure inducing screaming emails that are like, you didn't file your FAFSA. But if you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see of these emails, sometimes you'll see a disclaimer. By the way, if you filed your FAFSA, you can ignore this email. So some of it's junk, but some of it you really have to tend to. You won't know until you read the whole thing. And then to continue on, not just after you get these responses from the college and then you respond to those responses and all that, then the actual awards come. And that's when you should be figuring out whether you have any grounds for improving those awards by negotiating or appealing those awards. So in the case I mentioned this morning, we are appealing an award that we believe was mistakenly given. They didn't factor in all the considerations that they normally would, but there's other grounds for appealing also. It could be that you had a drop in income since you filed. So if you have a 2026 kid, they're looking at your 2024 income, which is a 2-year look back. 2025, let's say that was a lot lower than 24. They wouldn't know that. So that's a basis for appealing. Another basis could be you had a super high bump in extraordinary expenses. Maybe you started supporting a family member, or you had some legal bills or something like that. Not, I live in a high tax area. Property taxes don't spike, and they know where you live, so that's not new information. Or maybe you have other offers from colleges that compete with your particular college. Maybe that's something you want to try to use as leverage. So it's never over till it's totally over, till that fat lady has sung. Can I still say that? Yeah. Till the non-Ozempic, big-boned, non-Sydney Sweeney lady has sung. Because colleges don't always give their highest and best offers out of the gate. They frequently will lowball you because they don't want to give you all the money that you might otherwise deserve. They can't afford to give everyone full financial aid awards. They're getting their funding cut. They're laying professors and I think a lot of admin off left and right, which is probably a good thing overall, but a lot of people are up in arms about it. So we'll see where that all pans out. But I think this year, in terms of financial aid awards and merit scholarship awards, it's going to be I hope it's going to be a buyer's market, smart shoppers market, because colleges are under a ton of fiscal pressure. Enrollments is trending down. It just started to. Last year in 2024, the class of 2024 had the highest number of high school graduates, I think, ever, 3.9 million kids. And we're starting to trend down for 2025 and 26 and all that. So there's this enrollment cliff, that's the term that the colleges use, that's putting them under pressure to cut costs, but it's also putting them under pressure to enroll students by bargaining. So I'm kind of cautiously optimistic and rubbing my greedy little hands in anticipation for this year in terms of what it's going to mean for negotiations. So if you have any questions or want some help about any part of the process, getting into college, the essays, the financial aid process, we actually do complete financial aid applications for our clients. You can just look at our website, lockwoodcollegeprep.com. We've got local workshops if you're in a local area. We do them most Wednesday evenings. I think we're a little overbooked for this Wednesday coming up, the 18th. But we've got a lot of free information on our website, so feel free to reach out to us that way. You can text us once you get to lockwoodcollegeprep.com, or you can just soak up some of the other valuable info that we try to put out there. And please subscribe to this podcast if you're listening to it on Apple or Spotify, or I think we're on Amazon. I'm not sure. We're a bunch of places. Please give us a rating. Same thing with YouTube's or Facebook or wherever you're watching this. The more we can spread the word about what we do, we can help more people. So appreciate that. I'm appreciating you in advance as well as retrospectively. I have so much appreciation. I'm going to wrap up here. Have a great week. We'll be back next week for College Coffee Talk, Mondays, 10 a.m. Eastern, on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Lockwood College Prep, as well as on the YouTubes and various podcast platforms. Bye-bye.